Welcome to this training module titled Source Documentation. The training focuses on the key principles of good documentation practice. Good documentation practice refers to methods and procedures for recording, correcting, and managing data, documents, and records to ensure the reliability and integrity of information and data collected throughout all aspects of research. In addition, a patient's legal health record must include documentation about participation in a clinical trial to provide a clear picture of their health journey. The scope of this procedure applies to all designated individuals and research staff who have the responsibility of documenting and maintaining source data involved in human subject research. While there are several definitions in the procedure, the key definitions include case report form. A case report form is a consistent method for study data collection and serves as a bridge between the site and study sponsor to ensure data reported to the sponsor aligns with source documentation. The electronic health record, MedConnect, serves as the primary location where data is initially recorded according to the clinical trial protocol, and subject data can be retrieved by authorized users. Source data. Source data refers to actual information, observations, or findings collected during a research study. Examples include lab results, vital signs, subject interviews, or original entries in MedConnect. And source documentation refers to the original records where data is first recorded and then transferred to the case report form for submission to the sponsors of the study. Please refer to the MedStar Georgetown Glossary for more comprehensive definitions. The principal investigator is responsible and accountable for ensuring that source documentation is accurate and complete. While the investigator can delegate the task of completing source documentation to other qualified research members involved in a study, the investigator may not delegate responsibility or accountability. In the first part of this procedure, we have introduced the purpose, scope, definitions, and some key information about the procedure. We are now going to transition into discussing the set of actions to manage source documentation. The acronym ALCOA-C represents a set of principles used in clinical research to ensure the integrity of source documentation. ALCOA-C principles include attributable. Every data entry should be traceable to the person who collects or recorded it. Legible. Data is documented in a manner that can be easily read and understandable. Contemporaneous. Data should be recorded at the time the event of observation occurs. Original. Original records should be used and not photocopies. Accurate. Data should be precise, consistent, and reflect the true facts. Complete. All relevant data should be included and nothing should be missing. Next, let's look at common source documents where these documents serve as the primary source of data and are used for validating and reconstructing the trial. Some examples include subject diaries, laboratory results, pharmacy dispensing, medical imaging such as an MRI or CT, the informed consent process, adverse events, any automated instrument such as an ECG, and of course, the electronic health record. Why is source documentation important? Source documentation provides the original record of a subject's data to verify the accuracy of data collected for the trial. Source documentation confirms that a subject meets eligibility criteria and documents the progress from enrollment to completion. Source documentation ensures compliance with the protocol and all regulations and regulatory guidelines. And source documentation contains the source data necessary to reconstruct and evaluate the trial. Reconstruction of the study. Source documentation allows for the reconstruction of the study as it happens, enabling an independent observer, such as a monitor, auditor, or FDA inspector, to trace back data to its source and verify the findings. In other words, source documents tell the story of the subject's participation in a clinical trial and must be part of the patient's legal health record. Here's a story to help illustrate the point and provide context. John diligently manages his type 2 diabetes. He takes his prescribed medication every morning and carefully watches his diet, and he enjoys working in the garden. While working in his garden, he felt fatigued, irritable, and had a metallic taste in his mouth. As he thinks, he recalls. His fingerstick test showed a high glucose reading, leaving him frustrated with the erratic pattern of his reported glucose levels. The medication didn't seem to be working as it should. Concerned, John scheduled an office visit with his physician and checked his navigation system to estimate the travel time in traffic. The physician listened patiently, reviewing his latest lab results, and noted the erratic pattern of his reported glucose levels. The physician is thinking, how can he get a clearer picture of what's happening throughout the day, not just the snapshots from his finger sticks? The physician invited John to participate in a clinical trial that prescribed a continuous glucose monitoring system, which is a small sensor to wear on the arm that reads glucose levels every few minutes. Data is sent to a smartphone app for the user, and the data can also be shared with the physician. The data will show how John's body reacts to food, exercise, and even stress in real time. John was hesitant at first, unsure about wearing a device constantly, but his desire to feel better outweighed his apprehension. He signed a research consent form and left the office with a prescription and instructions on how to apply the sensor, feeling a flicker of hope. The investigator will request to amend the clinical trial budget for additional screening costs due to the increased use of a continuous glucose monitor. Over the next few weeks, John felt better and had the energy to return to his garden, and the monitor provided a wealth of data. It revealed patterns John never knew existed. With the detailed insights from the continuous glucose monitoring system, John was able to fine-tune his medication, timing, and dosage. The monitor, once a source of apprehension, became John's ally. What about MedConnect? The core principles of source documentation refers to the first place data is recorded. Information of symptoms, lab results, vital signs, diagnosis and prescription, and continuous monitoring data entered directly in MedConnect serves as the primary original record for the subject's health information. Since we know that MedConnect serves as the primary original record for the subject's health information, let's look at shadow charts. The analogy of shadow charts is like an iceberg, where the tip of the iceberg represents a shadow chart or the fragmented history of a subject's health record. It is the submerged portion of the iceberg representing the vast amount of information in the medical record that is essential for gaining a deeper understanding of a subject's overall health journey. So, what are shadow charts? In research, shadow charts are duplicate, unofficial document collections of medical records that exist outside of the patient's legal health record and are highly discouraged. While shadow charts may seem harmless, they bring three significant risks. First, patient safety. Relying on shadow charts compromise patient safety by creating an incomplete and fragmented medical history. Administrative burden. Constantly printing and reconciling multiple versions of shadow charts adds significant manual labor and can introduce errors. Audit and compliance. Multiple document versions directly contradict good clinical practice guidelines, creating confusion. Let's look at two examples. A single high glucose lab report was printed from the electronic health record and presented to the monitor as a shadow chart. No other documentation was presented to the monitor during the monitoring visit. The single high glucose lab report included additional documentation explaining that the subject had an acute urinary tract infection and that the high glucose reading is clinically insignificant. The documentation discrepancy itself poses a risk to the study's data integrity. Example 2. A subject had an annual physical exam and the vital signs, lab results, and physical were printed from the electronic health record and used as a shadow chart. 1 month later, the subject presents with complaints of severe abdominal pain, followed by abnormal lab results. The shadow chart was never updated. If a monitor does not have direct access to source documentation, they may miss a critical diagnosis related to a newer subject visit, leading to potential safety risks. Addendum to source documentation. Very simply put, an addendum is a document that adds new information or clauses to the original document without changing its core terms. If source documentation is incorrect, incomplete, or otherwise deficient, research personnel may correct and/or complete by making an additional entry or addendum. A late entry requires the person making the entry to sign or initial and date it with the current date, not the date of the original event. The investigator or research personnel must never modify past dated source documentation and research records to resolve deficiencies. And if you are correcting your own note, you may strike through initial and date. Altering past dated records is potentially fraudulent. Case report form as source documentation. Direct data into a case report form and their use as the source document should be explicitly approved by the sponsor and pre-specified in either the study protocol, manual, or other procedural documents. Case report forms used as source documents must follow Alcoa C guidelines. Note to file. As we heard earlier, good documentation in the electronic health record tells the story of the study subject and decreases the need for excessive use of a note to file. An excessive number of note to files can be a red flag, suggesting systemic issues with study procedures or documentation. A note to file should document the root cause of the identified problem, the corrective action taken, and that the corrective action resolved the problem and signed and dated by the author. The subject level note to file is to clarify any issues related to an individual subject's participation. And a study level note to file provides additional information, explanation, or clarification for an issue that affects the entire study. Let's take a look at some note to file examples, starting with discrepancy and omissions. The subject level includes missing or incomplete subject data or a missing signature on an informed consent. Study level includes a protocol missing in the trial master file. Examples of protocol deviations at the study level include missed procedure for all subjects, or a dosing schedule variance for all subjects. A subject level includes an out-of-window visit for one subject. And looking at clarifications, study level examples include using a different lab in a multi-site trial with approval by the sponsor, or any new safety data from the sponsor. And a subject level example includes a subject's question to clarify a procedure in the study. Let's transition to relevant communication. Relevant communication is founded on protocol information and source documentation, which are critical for data integrity, subject safety, and regulatory compliance. Non-relevant communication refers to information that does not pertain to the specific details of the study or subject's care within a study, such as directions to a clinical site or ordering additional supplies. Financial and contractual information is sensitive business data, and access is typically restricted to authorized personnel only to protect confidentiality and ensure regulatory compliance. Let's go back to our story and look at relevant communication. John is fatigued, irritable, and has a metallic taste in his mouth. And documentation of symptoms serves as a standard to make informed diagnosis and coordinate care over time and are considered relevant communication. An erratic pattern of glucose levels is relevant communication because the glucose results impact immediate care and future treatment. John checked his navigation system to estimate travel time and traffic to the physician. This is non-relevant communication because in a healthcare context, directions are not clinical findings, observations, or actual care. John signed the informed consent to participate in a clinical trial. And this is relevant communication because it is the original primary record of a subject's involvement in research. John was prescribed a continuous glucose monitor, and a prescription is an original record of a subject's medication or treatment. The physician needs additional funds for screening and is requesting an amended budget. This is not considered source documentation because it is a financial and administrative record, not an original record to reconstruct the study. And the continuous glucose monitor provides a wealth of data and helps with the evaluation for new glucose-lowering medications. Medical records from outside facilities. Attempts to collect copies of medical records from outside facilities and primary care providers should be made if records contain supporting documentation related to a research study, such as adverse events or endpoints. Document each attempt to collect copies of medical records. To collect copies, a signed authorization form should be signed and retained in the research record only, unless the record obtained is used for clinical care as well. Please refer to the form titled Authorization for Release of Medical Information. The following forms, Authorization to Release Medical Information and Note to File, are forms related to this procedure. Just a reminder that in clinical trials, logs and forms are considered records and are subject to review by the FDA during an inspection, including those in electronic format. Research records must be retained for the longer period between federal regulation, state statute, sponsor contract terms, or institutional policy. In summary, source documents allow an independent party to reconstruct the study as it happened and confirm that data entered in the case report form accurately reflects the original findings. ALCOA-C is an acronym for a set of principles in clinical research that ensures the integrity and quality of data. Shadow charts are duplicate collections of medical records that exist outside of the patient's legal health record and are discouraged. A note to file explains errors, discrepancies, or other issues in study records, such as why a document or signature is missing. An addendum is a document that adds new information to an original document without changing its core terms. Relevant communication is protocol information and source documentation, which are critical for data integrity, subject safety, and compliance. Common source documentation is primary data essential for recreating and evaluating the trial, with electronic versions of these documents now being used as common source documentation. Takeaway 1. Source documentation should meet the certain fundamental elements of quality, which is ALCOA-C. Takeaway 2. Source documentation provides the foundation for data integrity and regulatory compliance. And takeaway 3. Source documentation is essential for ensuring subject safety and validity of trials results. This concludes the overview of the source documentation procedure. If you would like more information on this joint MedStar Georgetown procedure, please visit the Georgetown website shared on the screen or the MedStar Health Research Institute procedures available on Starport. If you have any questions about the source documentation procedure, you should ask your manager for clarification or assistance. They can provide guidance, answer your questions, and help you understand the procedure more effectively. Thank you.